We can substitute in pesticide resistance. We can herbicide resistance. So anytime that a species that can proliferate, grow fast, it is a generalist species. It's what we call R-selected, which means that it has a tendency to produce lots of offspring really fast. If you're a species like that, then your reproductive episodes are pretty quick. And so think about insects and weeds, and in this case, bacteria. Okay.
Are they the ones that die really quickly though?
So that's what they're going to talk about. So how in the world do bacteria become resistant, or how do these species like this become resistant to those chemicals or antibiotics? So that's what this is going to talk about. And it talks because it relates to actually our chapter for many, or our experience for many reasons. One of them is about human health. Another is about evolution. Another one is about how populations of different species grow. So all of this kind of falls underneath those umbrellas. So here we go. Not that. There's tons of these different videos. I try to use different ones. I like this little TED Ed guy. He's pretty good, but there's lots of these different ones that talk about it. What I don't like about this is they're making the bacteria look like insects. So they're talking, because we always say they're like bugs, you know. I'm too much of a realist.
Microorganisms called bacteria were some of the first life forms to appear on Earth. Though they consist of only a single cell, their total biomass is greater than that of all plants and animals combined. And they live virtually everywhere, on the ground, in the water, on your kitchen table, on your skin, even inside you. Don't reach for the panic button just yet. Although you have 10 times more bacterial cells inside you than your body has human cells, many of these bacteria are harmless or even beneficial, helping digestion and immunity. But there are a few bad apples that can cause harmful infections, from minor inconveniences to deadly epidemics. Fortunately, there are amazing medicines designed to fight bacterial infections. Synthesized from chemicals or occurring naturally in things like mold, these antibiotics kill or neutralize bacteria by interrupting cell wall synthesis or interfering with vital processes like protein synthesis, all while leaving human cells unharmed. The deployment of antibiotics over the course of the 20th century has rendered many previously dangerous diseases easily treatable. But today, more and more of our antibiotics are becoming less effective. Did something go wrong to make them stop working? The problem is not with the antibiotics, but the bacteria they were made to fight. And the reason lies in Darwin's theory of natural selection. Just like any other organisms, individual bacteria can undergo random mutations. Many of these mutations are harmful or useless, but every now and then, one comes along that gives its organism an edge in survival. And for a bacterium, a mutation making it resistant to a certain antibiotic gives quite the edge. As the non-resistant bacteria are killed off, which happens especially quickly in antibiotic-rich environments like hospitals, there is more room and resources for the resistant ones to thrive, passing along only the mutated genes that helped them do so. Reproduction isn't the only way to do this. Some can release their DNA upon death to be picked up by other bacteria, while others use a method called conjugation, connecting through pili to share their genes. Over time, the resistant genes proliferate, creating entire strains of resistant superbacteria. So how much time do we have before these superbugs take over? Well, in some bacteria, it's already happened. For instance, some strands of Staphylococcus aureus, which causes everything from skin infections to pneumonia and sepsis, have developed into MRSA, becoming resistant to beta-lactam antibiotics like penicillin, methicillin, and oxacillin. Thanks to a gene that replaces the protein beta-lactams normally target and bind to, MRSA can keep making its cell walls unimpeded. Other superbacteria, like Salmonella, even sometimes produce enzymes like beta-lactamase that break down antibiotic attackers before they can do any damage. And E. coli, a diverse group of bacteria that contains strains that cause diarrhea and kidney failure, can prevent the function of antibiotics like quinolones by actively booting any invaders that manage to enter the cell. But there is good news. Scientists are working to stay one step ahead of the bacteria. And although development of new antibiotics has slowed in recent years, the World Health Organization has made it a priority to develop novel treatments. Other scientists are investigating alternate solutions, such as phage therapy or using vaccines to prevent infections. Most importantly, curbing the excessive and unnecessary use of antibiotics, such as for minor infections that can resolve on their own, as well as changing medical practice to prevent hospital infections, can have a major impact by keeping more non-resistant bacteria alive as competition for resistant strains. In the war against superbacteria, de-escalation may sometimes work better than an evolutionary arms race.
Okay, so put down what you think, what they said. You can incorporate what you know. So how did antibiotic resistance an example of natural selection? Remember, natural selection is that theory that those organisms that have the best individual traits for that particular environment have a better chance of passing them on to future generations. And those that do not, are less fit, then they're not going to be able to pass on those genes. So they're the sick or the slow or the less adapted, then they have less of a chance. Okay, so tell me your thoughts first before we write anything down and I hear from you. What were some of the, and before I go any further, congratulations. Yeah, money. Yeah. That was a good time. What did you have?
I thought it was my students. I would
Oh, no, he didn't, because I had to go up there later. I went up there and I had some guys to help me, some men that were working at the school, and they just kind of helped me. But okay, tell me your thoughts first, like as you're watching. What was some of the information anything that's shocking?
I like the one, evolutionary arms race. That's a good one.
So what does that imply? If it's an evolutionary arms race?
It's like each side is just getting like stronger and stronger, and it's just, we're like kind of at a standstill.
So does evolution ever stop?
No.
It's not
like
what we call
every-
static. Right, it's
Yeah,
what,
each side keeps pushing and pulling and pushing and pulling.
that's what I told you. Please don't there. Diego, what'd you say?
Is that like an example of co-evolution?
Could be, absolutely. Coevolution is natural selection at work. Yep. Evolutionary arms race. Okay, who is this, so this arms race between who? Who is this arms race between?
Is it like human?
All right, so it could be, oh yeah, just put it right there. It could be, in this case, it's bacteria and antibiotics. And I would say an environmental, something in the environment, which is the antibiotic. Some kind of environmental factor that you've introduced to them, which would be that. Who else could an evolutionary arms race be between? Not in this case, but what were you just saying? So who would you be pushing and pulling with? Something, yeah, something else, somebody else. So an organism can be, you could have the evolutionary arms race. So it all depends on who's driving the change. So in terms, bless you, of evolution, you're always asking who's driving or what factors are driving the change. So when you think about evolution in that way, it's going to help you when you go around in the gallery walk, because when you see examples of symbiosis or competitive exclusion or exploitative competition or interference competition or resource partitioning, all these different mimicry, all of these are that push and pull. So there's something that's always going to stimulate or encourage a change and another. And that's how we are. If we just kind of, as a species, just say, we're not going to change anymore. And what happens to your species? You'll become extinct. And I don't think it's that simple, but I do think that there's always something to think about the mind. Humans are a little different when it comes to evolution. We kind of defy evolution in many ways. But it doesn't mean that there's not always a change that's going to cause us to have to do the same. All right, so anyway, now let's put it together. So what's happening? How is this whole thing about antibiotics and bacteria an example of natural selection? Okay, let's go.
Bacteria would just be to survive against the antibiotics, which is coming in and wiping them out. Some have mutated and become stronger and resistant.
Okay, so hold that thought. So we said, all right, so antibiotics, because they were the miracle drug. Alexander Fleming, when he discovered that penicillin can kill bacteria in a petri dish, and this was around World War I, I think. No. It's a relatively very new discovery. So people would die of all these secondary infections, gangrene. Think of all the people that would, they get septic is what that's called. So that bacteria gets into their bloodstream and it becomes a systemic problem, organ failure. So when those antibiotics were introduced, it's like, oh my goodness, it's a miracle drug. So antibiotics kill those bacteria without the resistance gene. And then you said a mutation and some strains or types, or whatever word you use. Strains is just one term for like a different type of bacteria or a different form of a particular type of bacteria. Okay, so you said a mutation, some did what?
They were resistant, they didn't die, and since that they either passed on the genes or shared them with other weaker bacteria.
Okay. Okay, so this resistance can be the fact that maybe the cell wall is not as, as vulnerable. Maybe it resists just hammering and poking a hole in it. Another way is the antibiotic can, the resistance can prevent, where an antibiotic can prevent a bacterium from reproducing its DNA. It can actually spit it back out. So it comes in, it goes, just doesn't allow it to interfere with this metabolism. So for an antibiotic, to resist to the antibiotic, this gene or is passed between bacteria. And so those of you who remember a bacterium has a chromosome, a plasmid DNA, cell wall, cell membrane, ribosomes. That's all bacteriums is, right? So these resistance genes are in those little plasmids. So they can just swap plasmids, which would be kind of cool. So that's one way they can pass it. They said they can uptake it. And then once you do have that, those that have that gene, they're reproducing, right, at a higher rate because they're selected for. So they reproduce to pass on the gene to the next generation. So do you remember how often most bacteria reproduce? About how often? About every 20 minutes. Oh my goodness. That species is reproducing at a very high rate. So what we find is evolutionary, the rate of natural selection or microevolution happens quicker in species that have many reproductive episodes, produce lots of offspring at one time, have these short generation times. That makes sense, right? Because your generations are very quick.
Isn't that a thing like R factor?
That's the R selected versus K selected. You're exactly right. So those R factor, the R selected species, that's their MO. Who do you think has a tendency not to evolve as fast and are more subject to extinction? True.
Man.
But what's kind of the MO? What would be like the job description, or who's like the face of that kind of species? Could be. We have a long generation. Big mammals, right, compared to small mammals like rodents. You know, they reproduce pretty fast. Think of all those species that have those generalist species versus the specialist. Who do you think would have a tendency to become extinct?
Specialist.
Narrow niche, very limited food source. Yeah, so those species are the ones we really, really have to protect. So governments who want to not protect these, you know, the habitats of these species, are to start taking them prematurely off of a list, which means they don't have to protect their habitats too. So the Endangered Species Act does, is it not only protects the individual, but its habitat, so that because that's where it's going to get its food. So they reproduce to pass the resistance to the next generation. Okay, now if I was writing this for an essay, if I just say reproduce to pass it on, they may imply, I mean, it's implied what that means, but you still have to specify. That way you know for certain that they're going to give you the point. There are no half points in AP grading. It's either a Z, you just don't get the point, or you get the point. They won't give you partial credit. So, you know, that's kind of something to think about too, is just pretend the person knows nothing about what you're talking about, and you're having to be more, you know, deliberate in what you say. Yeah.
So with AP Psychology, we're given a list of vocabulary words that we have to have in there, and we underline them. With AP Environmental, do we just, because we're not given vocabulary words that we have to have in it, but any word that we think is like important?
We're going to have a master list of words. So what we'll do is, that's going to be one of the reviews that we do, is we'll have some words to use that will help, like those tier 2 words to utilize that aren't really science words. But then we'll have, like, when we do a unit, let's say on soils, then we'll put everything in there that we know we need to do. And that would be really something we can do along the way. And not wait till the end, because that's when you're like in crunch time, you're like, oh my goodness, I've got all these AP tests to do. So it's probably best for us to do it along the way. You know, that way you'll have
words we were doing bio on where you had like all the letters, and every time we had like a word.
And my students still like that. They like those ABC, we call them the ABC vocabulary. They like that because they go through all the words and just list them. We can do that. And it's not such a tedious way to do it. Okay, so next thing is, let's go to the answers to these. Because we didn't do that, right? Those, this one said type rate quiz. Let's just run through those answers if you have questions, and then we're going to go to this data because we can keep on rolling. And then what I'm going to do after we go over the peppered moth is I have evolution highlights. So questions that you have about evolution. In particular, I wanted to go over directional, stabilizing, and disruptive selection, because those are 3 graphs, and those are actually here, right here. So I want to make sure we understand some of that. So and coevolution, adaptive radiation, convergent, divergent, that kind of stuff. And then the whole niche concept. So any of this that's here, we need to make sure that, we feel okay about it. Okay, so here we go. So number 1, a realized niche is A. Okay. Good. I've got it. That's it right there. Yep. It has the little blocks on it. That's how I found mine. Okay. Number 2, D. Number 3, E. Number 4, C. Wait, is that right? Hold up.
I got C.
No. I want to make sure I did that. Yeah. It is C. I would put number 3 at first. I was like, what is that? All right, number 5, D.
Wait, so what's your number? C.
Yeah.
4 is C.
Yeah. Number 6, A. So Miller and Urey's experiment was the one it focused on. Actually, they synthesized organic materials in a closed tube setup. And I think they had it in the old book.
It's
They
not.
have, it's not?
I couldn't find it.
Yeah, because it's in the old book, and I keep saying, oh, yeah, it's in the book, but I didn't think, because I was looking through your chapter and I didn't see it, but I was hoping maybe I just missed it. But anyway, these guys did it. I mean, they made organic molecules spit out at the end of it, and it's like, oh my gosh, this could have happened. So number 7 is D. Number 8, which one is the longest? Took the longest to complete?
A.
Biological evolution?
Yeah.
And we're still in it, right? I mean, it's still happening. It's not like it's stopped.
When does it stop, or does it ever stop?
It never stops until the earth is annihilated. So number 9 is B. Number 10, C. Okay, so molecular forms of a gene. So we say the gene, this goes, it's like genetics 101. So we say that the gene would be for hair color, and the alleles are all the different forms of hair color. Remember that? So like when you learn genetics, it's like capital letter, lowercase letters.
Yeah.
That's what those were. Let's see. A loci is a gene location on a chromosome. All right, number 11 is A. That's the only way we can add brand new genes spontaneously within a population. Now we know you can join a group, you can leave a group, somebody can squash you and remove your genes from the group, but the brand new genes only can arise through mutation. All right, number 12, A. Number 13, C. 14, D. You've got to isolate them. Number 15 goes to the back, which should be C. Yep. So all your domesticated animals and plants, your crops, are all products of artificial selection, selective breeding. So think about most of our plants. I mean, carrots, broccoli, cauliflower, corn, Brussels sprouts. All those just come to mind. You know, that we've just kind of crossbred them until we get the outcome we want. Number 16 is the more species overlap, the closer their niches are. That means there's more competition, so it's B. Number 7, so does everybody understand what I'm talking about there? So so you've got, let's say that Isabel and she can occupy this whole room because her requirements for whatever she needs to stay alive, the predators that she has, the prey that she eats, the symbiosis that she has with other organisms. I mean, everything about her job in this environment. And I walk in and I have almost the exact same. So that means we have the same or almost an identical niche.
Is that what an ecotone is, like the overlap? Or is
that is actually where two ecosystems overlap. What this means is her species is different from my species, and we can actually occupy the same job in an ecosystem. And if we try to coexist, there's going to be hell to pay because we're going to battle. And one of us is going to either exclude the other, or we're going to have some overlap. And when we do overlap, there's going to be some competition going on. But for those resources.
In invasive species, they might not have a predator, and they might.
Oh, and then you throw those non-natives in there, they're just like, we don't care, we can just take on over. So, and that's where resource partitioning is one of these. So maybe we can say, hey, okay, and they don't just talk about this. It's like they assume it. So it might be she starts eating at night, I start eating in the daytime. Or she starts to occupy this part of the forest and I occupy this part of the forest. So we decide.
like avoiding pollution.
What is that called again?
Resource partitioning. So these are all ways to how to coexist with each other, you know. So which kind of ecosystems do you think provide more opportunities for that? Those that are real stratified, like all your forests, or those that are like, or a coral reef, or desert, grassland. So which ones are going to provide more options?
Forests have more variation.
Yeah, so think about that. More productive, they're more stratified, so there's more, not just physical space, but there's more opportunity for you to do your thing at the same time with someone else. Does that make sense?
Everything in apes is like forest, like it's
all connected. So I kind of think of it as like you go to a big city, you know, versus one that's not so much. More stratification, I guess. Okay. All right, so number 17, the smaller is always the realized niche. Number 18, the only thing that can lead to speciation. Which of those can lead to macroevolution?
Is it
E. Has to be natural selection. Yep. All right, number 19, if you leave a place, is it B or C? Or enter a new place?
C.
It is C, and you don't know how many folks will get those mixed up because we think of drifting as moving. Number 20, a deer's hit crossing the road.
B.
That's B, genetic drift. Random chance event removes them. 21, all those are examples of D. All right, so a gene pool is a population. It's all the collective genes within that population. So a population is the smallest unit of evolution. You can't say, oh, he's evolved into a nice young man. We're not really using that word properly. So evolve, we can say it meaning that he's changed, but implying that. But the smallest unit, the unit of evolution is a group of the same species. So it's a population. Okay. All right. So now questions. We didn't go over the graphs at the bottom. I'm sorry. 22, because you have variations on the extremes, that is exploitive, I guess, A. 23 is always good if you are going one way or the other. This is your peppered moth. So one variation is more favored than another. That is directional. See. And then 24, stable, bell curve, average is better. Okay, so kind of in the middle is better than the extremes. Okay, so that is that. So that brings us to, that would be question on the very back, the 3 types of selection. So let me, I'm just going to kind of reiterate that. I know you didn't have to answer that, but I'll just go back over just to explain with some examples. And so if you did, awesome. Okay, so talk to me about, I'm gonna go over those three and then ask me questions before we get into, I know I'm jumping kind of ahead, but we'll come back to the pepper moth. I just think we probably need to keep on going with the flow here. All right, so, this is kind of how I think of it. All right, natural selection, leads to macroevolution. This is just kind of a little concept map. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so this is what you actually are going to be graphing. You're going to graph the number of individuals at whatever the variation is at the bottom. Okay, so you had several different variations of moss. Okay, so 6 different ones. So this would go at the bottom. Okay, so that's what that means. So this would be the extremes. So let's say that for directional for the peppered moth, I'll use that as the example. This is all the black moss, the darkest gray to black. This is like albino moth, and then everything in between. So pre-industrial revolution, how would the graph look? Which way would it, the word would be skewed. So which way would it be skewed? Right? To the right.
This.
And that might be what we would see if there was no pollution, more white variation, more the white ones than the dark ones. This is not zero. They don't go away. They just might be the fast ones that got away. They're still, their genes are still in the gene pool. It's just their numbers have been reduced to a really, really low number. So all the slow pokes have already been eaten and the sick ones have already been eaten. So now we've just got the really fast, darker ones that are able to escape the predator, which are mainly birds. That's who would eat these moths. Okay, so now we've got the Industrial Revolution. And who's now standing out? Yeah, now the dark ones. So then we're starting to see a shift, and it wouldn't just be like this, because we know that there's going to have to be reproduction time, but eventually it'll go up like that way. So that's directional, when one variation is favored more than the other. All right. Okay. So let's say that there's a mutation that creates a really, really short beak in a hummingbird.
Oh, God.
And then you've got a really long beak in a hummingbird. Well, if all of their food sources require a long beak, what's going to happen to these?
They're going to die.
So this is what we say. If you say they, yeah, go ahead.
Are you saying directional leads to macroevolution? Or are you saying
no? This is separate. This is just all. No, this is just It could. It's not really. You could relate this to this. How a new species forms is they have to be isolated. So if they were isolated and then this starts to happen, then we'll start to see one extreme favored over another. So if we said they're going to die, we would say they would be selected against. We got to use those words. So they would be selected against. Their population would do what? Decline, decrease, go down. So that's kind of the wording that we would use, is selected against or selected for, and then their population would be reduced or it would increase, because these would reproduce at a higher rate. And those wouldn't have an opportunity to, because they're going to starve to death probably. Now, not all of these flowers are perfect. There might be some that are a little shallower, and hey, there's some of these that have kind of a medium to long beak. They're going to be okay. Maybe it's
Would they
made.
co-evolve?
Hmm?
Would they co-evolve?
So that is why I want to use that example. So that's going to be a co-evolution example, or one of them. All right, so that's directional. So this also, one more example, and these also are that co-evolution in a way too, is what if we've got, who's a species that can run really fast?
Ostrich.
Cheetah.
A what?
Ostrich.
A cheetah. Okay, so let's say we have a cheetah, and the cheetah has less mitochondria in their muscles, so they can't produce as much ATP. So they're like running their little hearts out, but they're just not too fast. So we may have little slowpoke cheetah on this side, and we have the really, really fast cheetahs over here. And remember that in natural selection, you only have to be faster than one other person or one other thing, because we're going to let them be someone's dinner, and I'm going to escape. So that's kind of what's happening here is fast, 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 super fast. Here's slow, slow, slow. And then we have this gradient that we encourage. So does that make sense? Kind of how it works. Okay, so that's directional. Then we have stabilizing. Stabilizing. Did I spell that right? Stabilizing, close enough. Okay, so stabilizing, variation, number, average is best. A good example of this one is human weight. And I would probably argue that would be true for most mammals. If a baby is too small, they have less of a chance of survival. If the baby is too big, they can also have distress issues. So think about, even if the baby's so big that it can't get through the birth canal, the mom and the baby dies. So it's better to be average, right there in the middle. About 6.5, 7 pounds.
Consider those like 1 pound babies.
Oh man, I have one too.
So, about 1 pound babies, or I was like, what?
Wasn't like the biggest baby ever born like 20 pounds?
I have no idea. That she probably had gestational diabetes. I'm sure. I'm sure she had gestational diabetes.
How's that even possible?
It's where you can get it's called preeclampsia.
Yeah.
Or preeclampsia is what it's called. And you have to be bedridden, but you are gaining a lot of weight, and the baby can also gain weight, and it has a lot to do with your metabolizing your sugar. So women who have that, my mom had that with me. I look at pictures of her, and she was huge. And I wasn't big. I was like an 8 pound baby almost. Which is big, but not really. But she just retained a lot of fluid. She was really swollen. But they didn't know what that was back then. But that's what it was.
My next door neighbor just had a 10-pound child.
What's the average weight for a baby?
6. So
Between 6 and 7.
So like
Little, because that's not bad to have a baby that size.
So like C-section and stuff, that's kind of like a way that we cheat evolution.
It is.
Yeah.
Totally cheating evolution.
the heaviest baby ever born was 22 pounds.
So the fact that Isabel said that, y'all hear me, and it's probably going to sound really insensitive, but that we cheat evolution all the time. And when you intervene with preemies, it's cheating evolution. But aren't we, we use our brains to come up ways to intervene, and that's just us using our resources and our ability. So who's to say that wasn't meant to be? I don't know, but yeah, it is. Yeah, you can go all kinds of ways with this, I'm telling you. Then disruptive.
I wish I could select against some people.
Okay.
Oh my god.
All right, extremes. These are the extremes. So extremes are best.
I wish I could select too.
So it might be that there is and this is where I'm going to tell you, someone in a different APES class watches this, then they can learn something about this too. I was told that, let's say that you cannot think of a real example of something. Like this, for example, I'm going to make up this example. But you know, in the example that you explain, that you're explaining it correctly, they're not going to spend the time to look up and see if you're right or not. If you explain it and you explained it correctly, they're going to give you credit for it.
Wait, what do you mean?
Okay, so like, for example, I'm going to say there's an obscure finch in Madagascar that it's in its population, there are two extremes of beak sizes. One is short, stubby, the other one is very long. There's virtually none that have a medium-sized beak. And this is because these eat and can obtain small worms on the ground, where this one stabs large caterpillars. I don't know. I'm just making this up. But the point is, there's a food source that this one can utilize, and they're still the same. This one can utilize, but there's not anything that they can utilize. So the extremes are favored.
What does that have to do with what you're saying?
So you can make up an example, just like kind of I did. You could say, you know, an obscure fish in Guatemala. Yeah, you could say this, you know, this very rare fish in Guatemala. Within the population, there is a blue eye and there is a white eye. The white eye, you know, I don't know, but you would just have to come up with what is it useful for that the extremes would be favored.
I read that like there's pressure on the average, like the middle gradient, which is why it doesn't exist. So is that the same thing or is that something different? Because I'm understanding it better with this explanation, but I don't know if the explanation.
It all depends on what the selective pressures are.
Okay.
I mean, if the selective pressures for humans is not to have babies that are really small or really big, it's to be in the center. So it depends. If it was a giraffe's neck, there were short neck giraffes, we know that, but it was more favored for them to have a longer neck and they didn't stretch their neck big. It's just all those longer necks reproduce and said, hey, there's less competition up here than there is down here.
Wait, is there
So that's directional. So we see a whole lot of directional.
I feel like short-necked giraffes look so funny.
I think they were just down there with the zebras and the antelopes and
Wait, they're like
wildebeest.
Are there still some short-necked giraffes?
I'm sure they're shorter neck giraffes because the gene for shortness has not gone away. It's just, it's not selected for, you know. So that's how it works. Okay, ask me any more questions real quick. There's only one other thing I know I want to go over, and that is how do we get new species? Are you good with coevolution?
What's
Adaptive radiation?
Can you go over that?
All right, so that, so our next one was types of evolution, all under this umbrella. Okay, so this one you all right remember is there's two different species that influence the evolution of the other, or the change in the other influence evolution in another. Okay, so a good example is that pollinator flower. Okay, like the hummingbird and the flower. There is a flower that has evolved. I show sometimes in biology that it looks like a female fly. And the male fly is over there going, hey, I'm going to try to mate with you. And so it gets dusted with pollen, and dumb fly is like, oh, there's another one over there. And then it flies over here and it does the same thing. It cross-pollinates, none the wiser. Here it has no clue that it's not getting anything in return.
I actually saw that when I was looking up my thing. It's that type of flower.
Yeah.
It was like flowers.
I can't remember it. Do you have the Tricha? There was one called Tricha Saracentini or something like that. Tricha something. Did y'all come in and get one of these? Did everybody get one? Two different.
That influence evolution.
I wanna go home.
Okay, you guys, I actually find this class interesting.
Good thing someone
It's
does.
interesting, it's just,
I'm really glad someone does.
Yeah, because that I would not be able to.
Surprising.
That's me in English.
You're the only one right.
I think I'm the only one awake right now.
Yeah.
I'm tired.
So good.
I'm like, really, this whole thing is fun, but
I really don't want to go to Oakland.
Really?
Okay.
Well, Trace has coffee. That's weird.
Another dental coevolution. Predator prey. So if the prey gets faster, what happens to the predator?
it's faster.
Gets faster. What if you're a slowpoke predator?
You die. Or you don't.
Starve to death. Yeah, or I better find something else to eat. So now all the little fast predators are going to reproduce and pass on their fast genes. Now what's happening to the prey?
You better start running.
And all those little fast prey are going to say, peace, leave, and then all those little slowpokes are going to get eaten, right? And then they're going to reproduce at a higher rate. It's all differential reproductive success. That's all it is, okay? All right, so the other one, let's see, there was adaptive radiation, I think was one of them. And this is when, and this is related to this up here, speciation, is when you have one species that gives rise to many different species over time. So you have the ancestor, and then these are now very different species. So adaptive radiation, a good example is, gosh, any of the Galapagos Islands. I mean, the original finch and all the different finch species, the green iguana, the marine and the land iguana, the Galapagos, the honey creepers of Hawaii.
All these
So that's like the squirrels and Grand Canyon.
Yeah, so you had the one, and now there's two separate ones, and there's the Grand Canyon. It literally has separated them, so they are two different species.
What happens to Grand Canyon?
There was an original species that could jump, back and forth the Colorado River, and it could get back and forth. And then one population got stranded, and they could no longer reproduce with the rest of them. So they reproduced within their small group, and now there are the Abert squirrels, and the other one are the Kaibab squirrels.
So is that genetic drift or is that
Geographic isolation.
Geographic isolation, which leads to speciation. Because when you become reduced to a small reproductive group and you can only tap into the genes there, it's not like anybody else is coming in. You just got to go with it. And then after generation and generation. So there's probably a little inbreeding in there.
I wonder how long it will take for humans and like what population size you would have to
That's
evolve
the
a
key.
different species.
That's the key. How big does the population size have to be? Let's say we take, 100,000 people, put them in the middle of an island, leave them there for 1 million years, never see them again until 1 million years later. They would be a different species or subspecies.
How big is that island?
You have a lot of competition going on, survival of the fittest, and that, it depends on what the environmental pressures are.
But they probably find some way to get off the island.
That's the whole idea of Lord of the Flies. I love that book.
it's terrible.
I loved it. 8th grade, I read that book, and I thought, I get evolution. It's just like, I don't know.
Natural selection. Is fine.
Yes.
Of course, fine.
Or artificial. Okay, and then, I don't know, did y'all have divergent and convergent evolution in there? If not, I made
It
one.
was somewhere.
All right, divergent is this. Someone look up Tasmanian devil,
Yes.
and actually this is convergent evolution. Tasmanian devil, and then someone look up Wolverine. Not like the scary man. Yeah.
Is it like, is
This
it
is
the
a very
Tasmanian
simple-
devil? that at birth the mom produces like I don't know if it's I think it's 50, and like they have to like crawl to the front, like from the birth canal they have to crawl to her stomach.
It is so ugly.
And she only has like 4 nipples, and so only 4 can survive. So the first 4 that get there are like
The lucky
the
ones.
ones that live.
They're the most fit.
So 4 out of 50. That's like
I mean,
ensuring that you have. The
It's a
best ones.
marsupial. I mean, it has that pouch. But yeah, I know he's not cute.
He is.
Tasmanian devil, Wolverine. They are not the same species. Y'all, they're mammals, but one is a placental, the other is a marsupial, but they look alike because they live in the same environment. Y'all, look at how close those pictures are. It's pretty crazy how much they look alike.
So
Well, you said that
So no, what'll
Is that
happen?
like what leads
they're-
to
it's like a donkey, and then it would be sterile, or it would be.
So they can never reproduce. These lines will never come together because they're 2 separate species, genetically 2 dissimilar. But when they live and under the same selective pressures of their environment, they start to have this look the same. It almost is like couples who end up looking alike.
Somebody wrote a book called Wolverine versus Tasmanian.
So wait, like
It really isn't, but
Could
I always
they
think about that, how
reproduce
people can look like their dogs and stuff, I have neighbors that look like that. I'm like,
Have you
Don't
seen
look like
Kaylin
her.
McNeil's dog?
Kayla looks like her dog.
She looks exactly like her dog.
see, it's
Let me
weird.
just show you.
I would want my dog.
Wait, how do you look like a dog?
You're literally gonna be like,
No, you'll see. Okay, one more example of that, real quick, is picture a dolphin, a penguin, a whale, and a seal. None of them are related, but they all have similar body patterns because they live in the same environment. Oh yeah, kind of.
They look exactly alike.
their hair color.
Don't whales like have finger bones in their face or something like that?
She looks exactly like her dog.
I was watching an anime the other day and there was
Irritating.
that was an episode
Wow,
of
I thought you meant like
Look at
looks like a dog, looks like a dog. I expected you. Oh my God.
Okay, what's happening here?
two similar species are becoming different.
Yeah. So 2 similar species become dissimilar over time. Why? This is an Arctic fox
You're a red fox.
and a red fox.
And different environments.
2 different biomes. That's right.
Yeah, red fox is okay.
They're actually
They want like this.
there's this
They love birds.
I got red fox.
actually some people in Russia are actually learning. They're trying to basically recreate Arctic foxes and try to figure out how people did it.
That'd be so cool.
They basically made them domesticated foxes. They're domesticated. They're tame.
No, like
Who would-
I would
have
have tried to
fox
domesticate foxes. Like, there are people in the United States who have them as pets.
Yeah.
I would love to have a fox as a pet.
It's called the Darwin Games. Some people just look up Darwin Games. Somebody look it up. Darwin Games and see what it says.
I saw some, and they it's in Russia. They had it's been going on for years, over 50 years now. And they're just trying to domesticate foxes. And even some